everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Put the Guidebook Down, brought to you by Cultural Travel with me, Kiara, the creator, as your host. Today, we're going to start by exposing cultural travels ourselves a little bit by calling out the term we like to use of living like a local and immersive travel. Now, many people ask, is that even possible? What do you really mean by that? Is it just going to become another cliche or fad or just another marketing line? As a marketer and also the creator of cultural travel, this makes me really excited because it means that people are questioning what they're seeing in the content that they're taking in, which is a plus. It's also positive for me as well because it means that people are already starting to come around this idea of authentic cultural travel versus authentic cultural travel. In our previous episodes, we have talked about this idea of tourist versus traveler, some cultural faux pas, and then in some of Cultural Travel's other content, we've already talked about this idea of authenticity versus curated authenticity when it comes to tourism. In this episode, we're really going to break it down what it means for it to be authentically created, like what we pursue with cultural travel, or those other travel ads that you may see out there, or tourism saying, live like a local, and what that means. Then, how do you go about differentiating the two so you know that you are fully informed when making a decision for your travel, as well as making sure you're meeting all of your travel values and goals on that dream destination trip? One of the big questions I get with being the creator of cultural travel and also as a fellow traveler is some of these experiences that you may see on Airbnb for experiences, on booking.com, TripAdvisor, Expedia, etc., where people are advertising cultural events, cultural experiences, cooking classes, etc. And I know Airbnb does a great job with this for their experiences section that they're really building up, in that you get paired with a local host or maybe locals who don't want to host in accommodations, but they want to showcase their travel, maybe have a little bit of a side hustle, share more about their culture, etc. It's a great opportunity. And it's also great for people who are new to travel and maybe don't know where to start because if they're booking with Airbnb, they can easily add on those cultural experiences within their stay. Now, I'm going to admit that I'm one of those people who have done Airbnb experiences. And this was also kind of my first exposure to authentic experiences versus authentic cultural experiences. And the first one comes to mind, and it's one of my first Airbnb experiences, which is when they were starting to really build out this part of the platform, is when I was in Poland. I was visiting Gdansk, Warsaw, and Krakow. And during my stay in Warsaw, I ended up signing up for a babushka cooking class with a local, or as it was marketed as a local. Now, this woman was fantastic. It was one of those experiences where it's on the borderline between cultural experiences that are authentic or ones that may be a little bit curated of an experience because she has an established business in the area. She has her own building, and this is something she regularly does where she hosts several cooking classes throughout the day, throughout every week, and throughout the entire year. And with this, it's taught in English. A bunch of people from around the world show up, they sign up, and she takes them through the step-by-step process of making pierogi with a little bit of history and then also a little bit of local liquors or drinks as well. And I'm not taking anything away from this experience. I think she did an amazing job with it. I learned a lot. I am Polish. I've made pierogi before by scratch from my grandmother's recipe, so it was interesting to compare it with her recipe. And from that, I also met a bunch of different people. Some of them I'm still in contact to this day and have already reached out to me that they're popping into the area to visit me, which I'm super excited because it's just the power of small conversations that can truly leave a really big impact. And that's an example of one of them. But again, it's going back to this idea of, is it truly authentic or was it a curated experience? Now, because it was done in English, it was clearly marketed to foreigners. They're not locals showing up into these classes. And it's something that's habitually done almost daily. It's on the borderline of being considered just a curated experience. And I'm sure you're aware of this. This has been something very common now in other major tourist destinations, such as in Rome. If you're near the Colosseum, you're staying in one of the major touristy areas, then you might have come across the advertisement or seen in your hotel the authentic pasta cooking classes. And these come with a very large price tag, right? What is supposed to be just a regular pasta class, you might be making it from scratch, you may not, maybe coming into the process with different knowledge. There may be a cultural aspect, maybe history aspect, etc. Everyone likes to have their own flair to these classes, which again is beautiful, but at the same time, you get hit with a nice price tag of one ticket costing $120 for this experience, when you could have the same experience going into a smaller village and actually being in a family's home, learning how to make the grandmother's recipe. That latter one, with being in an actual local's home and working with the family, falls more into the side of a genuine, authentic cultural experience. Whereas the other one that comes with a very big price tag and is standardized throughout all the different offerings, which is something that you might see in TripAdvisor booking, and not throwing shade. It's just stating the facts of what's available for their offerings. But this tends to be one of those curated experiences where it's cookie cutter and everyone's getting the same experience and pretty much the same offerings. And again, I'm going to admit to right here, I am one of those people who have in the past paid the heavy price tag for one of those cookie cutter travel experiences. This was before I was fully aware of authentic cultural travel and what that means, and then how to differentiate between the authentic versus really curated experiences for all tourists. And that's okay. This is me completely admitting it, and that I was in the same boat as you. Or maybe you are already aware of this and you're steps ahead of me, but this is, again, a safe, accepting space, and we're just here about education to improve your travel experience. Then when I was in Moldova, I started coming more familiar with this clarification and differentiation between cultural travel, authentic versus inauthentic or curated experiences. And I have to say, like, one of the first cultural experiences that I had that helped really solidify this understanding and differentiation point for myself was when I was staying in one of the local villas, guest houses with a local family. And in Moldova, it's really common. It's called ecotourism. You have these guest houses with the families that they rent out to locals who are touring around the area, foreigners, etc. And with that, they do like breakfast, dinner together, etc. And one of my first experiences with the real authenticity of a cultural experience was when one of the babushkas, grandmothers, literally took me aside and offered to teach me how to make placenta. This was an offering to me one-on-one. It wasn't something that was offered to all the other residents in the villa at the time. And it was nothing extra. She just genuinely knew I had experience in living in Moldova. She liked the fact that I had learned Romanian, spoke Russian, and really made an effort to immerse into the local culture and learn. She wanted to demonstrate this other part of her culture by teaching me how to make the placenta recipe from her mom. She took me aside into the kitchen. We were just chatting in Romanian, and she took me through making the placenta from beginning to end. So we made it from scratch, and then she was explaining the history and the differentiation points between the different types of placenta, the different forms you can make with placenta. And she even helped me make a little to-go bag for myself, because I was actually leaving in a couple of hours by the marshrutka, the bus, to go back to my city where I was living in Moldova. And so we put together a little to-go bag, and it was like a sweet moment where we were hugging, and she was inviting me back to visit and everything. It was really fun, but I left there feeling like I just had a unique experience. I felt that I had built a bond with her, and she's someone that I can still reach out to and connect with, and I do plan on visiting her again. But it was something that was definitely one of a kind and not offered to everyone, and there was that whole authentic culture connection and experience with it. That was my first real authentic cultural experience, which became my established guidelines and baselines for when booking my other experiences in travel, seeking cultural immersion on what is real and which is maybe cookie cutter. And so I hope that gives like some examples from my own personal experience to you of where you can kind of get a sense of what is authentic, which is cookie cutter. If I have to like sum it up quickly, it's if you're going to book something usually offered by major tourism companies, and it's the same experience offered at different times of the day, of the week, throughout the entire year, you are getting a cookie cutter really not authentic cultural experience. And if that's what you're looking for, that's okay. If you're just trying to check the boxes, again, I just would like to encourage you maybe to pursue your research a little bit deeper to then try to find some of those smaller tourism companies, or make the reach out to a local and say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. Do you know anyone who could teach me about the subject matter? Because they're going to connect you with someone who's going to give you that one of a kind, authentic experience where you're going to leave with a different perspective, a deeper connection to the person that gave you the experience, and then also to the region that you were visiting. But then talking about this in the bigger scheme of things, on the next level of discussion, in that why are we offering these inauthentic cultural experiences then? Why aren't they all cultural, true, authentic cultural focus? And that are we going to all eventually fall into this cliche of live like a local, right? It's different. Every experience is going to be different, regardless if everyone starts doing this idea and concept of living like a local. But if we go back to the other point of then why are there these cookie cutter experiences offered? I think this comes down to several different points, right? So first one is some people just want that kind of chauffeured around experience that also comes with checklist travel. So they don't mind that they're getting the same experience as everyone else. They just want some surface level interaction and exposure to the country and culture that they're visiting. There's also the convenience factor where they know exactly what they're going to get. And all the experiences will list that, what's included, what's not included, what you will experience, etc. That's also a good indication that it's a cookie cutter experience. But again, people then are aware of exactly what they're going to get. So there's no unknown, which can make people uncomfortable. The third is that this has been always with traditional tourism, right? Is people plan their travel. Not many people are flexible or coming to a destination with no itinerary. I'm one of those people that needs to have somewhat of an itinerary. I used to always be planned down to the hour, minute. That has changed since my time abroad, and I've met people who just do the whole show up and figure it out thing. That's fine. I'm not that type of traveler. I like to have some structure with it, but it's uncomfortable to just show up and not know what you're doing, because especially if you're traveling for far away, you want to make sure you're getting your time and money worth it. Again, that's why people do offer those cookie cutter experiences, because it's already planned and they know what they're going to get. I think another big idea of it is back into that idea of traditional tourism. Tourism is a large portion of a country's economic system. And a big example of this is Indonesia with Bali. They have, I can't remember the exact percentage that their tourism contributes to the economy, but it's like over 50%. So the country puts a lot of focus into tourism development, which means they create a lot of these checklist cookie cutter tourist experiences to make sure that tourists are staying interested, they're getting some exposure to the culture, and still able to get the full, what they're marketing as Balinese experience. This helps with giving the locals jobs. That helps in some surface level of culture preservation, and it also helps in some surface level of people learning about the local culture. However, there are different schools of thoughts and approaches to this idea of benefits for the economy and then culture preservation when it comes to the cookie cutter travel. One side of it is, with the cookie cutter travel, you're only preserving the aspects of the culture in that ritual or experience that they want to showcase or preserve. Then maybe you're not getting the full scope of the ritual or experience. You're just getting a small exposure, and it may not even 100% be accurate, right? One thing with this is, in Indonesia, there is performances from the Javanese traditions and cultures that showcase their different stories. And there's a lot of performances with the masks, with the dances. And I learned this while there, it traditionally was like a 5 to 7 hour event. And this was way long ago when there was no other forms of like technology, media, entertainment. This was where people found their entertainment. They would go and sit at the theater for that long. Over time, the performances have gone shorter and shorter and shorter, to the point where now for tourists, the experiences range from 30 minutes to an hour and a half max. Now, that's crazy, because you're saying originally that it was 5 to 7 hours and now you've cut it down to just maybe 30 minutes. How is that possible? You're omitting information, obviously. Therefore, are we fully preserving the most accurate representation of the culture? Perhaps not. Maybe some get the highlights, but it's not the full thing. So then that comes into the discussion about this cookie cutter travel and maybe the difference between that and doing a authentic travel experience, because the authentic travel experiences are usually run by local tourists, smaller tourist groups who don't have to follow large corporate strategy, design, ideas, and they have more flexibility, is the word I'm looking for, in creating these experiences and showcasing their culture. Plus, they may have a different expression of the culture or different. The first thing that comes to mind is dialects, right? We think about countries having these standardized national languages, but then many have hundreds of dialects in there or smaller languages. So then you're getting a different experience within the culture and travel. And with that, so because as I mentioned, people do these cookie cutter travels because they want that checklist itinerary with complete known expectations. Authenticity isn't always about perfection, right? It's about the intention and openness and immersion that comes with it. Going back to that idea of living like a local, no one's lives are perfect, even in the era of social media. So many people try to market and create this facade of a perfect life. So by doing the authentic cultural experiences, you're actually getting the full insight of what it is to live like a local and the authenticness of the culture and language that comes with the experience. And it's not always going to be exactly the checklist. You're not going to maybe get the marketed version of the cultural festival that you see through photos and videos that maybe influencers have talked about, because it's not going to be perfect. You might get a completely different experience. You might learn something completely different. It might not be pretty. It might cast a darker exposure to a different part of history you aren't familiar with, etc. So that can be uncomfortable for people. And that's why with cultural travel, I always emphasize that people need to learn how to be flexible, adaptable, and start to get a little bit comfortable in the uncomfortable or unfamiliarity. And that's really where they begin to grow as a traveler, as a person, gain new experiences, perspectives, etc. And that's part of cultural travel, right? Because you want to leave your travel experiences with new adventures, new memories, new stories, but also a little bit of a better and deeper version of yourself. So if I have to define quickly my three ideas, or I don't want to say rules, my three suggestions for finding these authentic travel moments, it's going to be: one, try to avoid the easy to book travel websites, like the big travel names. You know who they are. I'm not going to mention them. I'm just saying because that's going to be your cookie cutter experience. If you don't believe me, go check how often they're offered, what the itineraries are. They're all exactly the same at every time offering, etc. Opt for the smaller local sourced tours or companies that might be a little bit more of a question mark, and they tend to be more flexible to make sure you're getting what you want out of your experience. My second one is if foreigners are the ones running these tours, are the tour guides, are operating the company and designing the itineraries, are not from there, it's most likely not the most authentic tour or experience that is out on the market. I would consider looking for a different option. The third one is anything that says influencer package, social media, Instagram tour, etc. Expect surface level and cookie cutter with everyone's getting the same thing and they're just taking you to the spots that are going to look pretty. So you're not necessarily getting in-depth knowledge and exposure to the culture, language, and history of the place you're visiting. And again, we're all at different points of our travel journey. I have admitted that I have been one that's done the inauthentic cultural travel tours and experiences in the past. I've done one in the middle, and then I've eventually made it to the end of where cultural travel is located and based, and the inspiration for it, in that it's completely unknown, it's spontaneous, and it's one of a kind immersive experiences where you really do get that insight into the local life. So if you did book through an ad, if you book through an influencer's recommendations, it's most likely not going to be authentic. And that's okay to start. But now that you have this knowledge, you've listened to this podcast, you can begin challenging yourself to go beyond the surface level of your research and make the extra effort to book something that's a little bit more immersive and authentic and not the cookie cutter checklist for every traveler. With that, I'm going to close out this episode. I hope you learned a little bit more in terms of the authentic versus maybe cookie cutter inauthentic experiences, and really what this idea of living like a local is. And it's not going to necessarily become this whole marketing cliche at the end. And if it is starting to go into that direction, now you know what factors to look for those tours or experiences marketing that way, so that you're not falling into that tourist trap. Please continue to subscribe, tune in, explore more of Cultura Travel. We are continuing more into this podcast series, and we'll be expecting a couple of different guests to come on to share their perspectives, experience, and travel stories with immersive cultural travel and to destinations off the beaten path. Stay tuned. Thank you.